They laughed when I said I'd make it on my own. My brother called me delusional. My ex-husband said I'd crawl back. And my in-laws? They kicked me out of my own home. But now, I own a mansion they can only dream of walking into. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Caroline Dunn, and I never thought my life would turn out this way. I used to believe in love, in family, in the idea that hard work and loyalty would always pay off. I was married to Ethan for almost 8 years. We started with nothing but big dreams and a small house on the edge of town. I supported him through every failure, every late night, every promise that things would get better. I worked full-time, managed our bills, and still tried to keep his spirits up when his business began to crumble. But when his company finally went under, Ethan changed. The man who once held my hand through everything became a stranger overnight. He stopped talking to me, started drinking, and then he began blaming me. He said I distracted him, that my nagging made him lose focus. His parents didn't help either. They always thought I wasn't good enough for him, that I came from too simple a background. When the business failed, they said it was my bad luck. And Ethan listened. I tried to stand by him, but no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. I got a promotion at work that could have saved us financially, but instead of being proud, he accused me of flirting with my boss. He called me selfish for wanting to keep my career when he had none. And the day I lost that job, because I gave in to his demand to quit, my own brother Matthew told me I should have known better than to dream too big. Those words broke something inside me. I wasn't asking for luxury. I just wanted peace, stability, and love. But everyone around me made me feel like wanting more for myself was wrong. When Ethan's parents convinced him to file for divorce, they kicked me out of the house we built together. I remember standing on the front porch with a small suitcase, watching the door close in my face. I called Matthew that night, asking if I could stay with him for a few days. He said, "Caroline, you made your choices. You'll figure it out." Then he hung up. I sat in my car, parked in front of a grocery store, staring at the reflection of the neon lights on the windshield. My hands were shaking. I had no job, no husband, no family, and nowhere to go. That was the moment I realized no one was coming to save me. If I wanted a different life, I would have to build it from the ground up, alone. Ethan's anger started small, short outbursts, slammed doors, and cold silence that lasted for days. But soon it became worse. He no longer hid his bitterness. Every time I tried to talk about our future, he turned it into a fight. When I received a promotion at my marketing job, something I had worked years for, I thought maybe it would ease our stress. Instead, it became the reason everything fell apart. He accused me of cheating with my boss, said no wife of his needed to prove herself at work. I tried to explain it was just a job, that I was doing it for us, but he didn't care. He told me to quit if I wanted to save our marriage. I didn't want to lose him, so I did. I gave up the one thing that still gave me hope. The day I turned in my resignation, I came home to find him drinking again, sitting in the dark like he'd been waiting for me to fall in line. He didn't even say thank you. He just said, "Now maybe you'll finally act like a real wife." That night, something inside me went numb. Soon after, his parents started calling more often. They'd always disliked me, but now they said openly that I was the reason Ethan was unlucky. They told him he needed a fresh start, a new life without me. I heard them say it over the phone one night. I was standing right behind him. He didn't defend me. He didn't even pause. He just said, "Maybe you're right." 2 weeks later, he told me to pack my things. I thought it was just another argument, but he meant it. His parents came the next day to help him, really to make sure I left. I begged him to at least let me stay until I found a place, but he said, "You'll be fine. You always say you're strong." I called my brother Matthew, crying, asking if I could stay at his place for a while. He sighed and said, "Caroline, I can't get involved. You made your bed. Now lie in it." The words hit me harder than the divorce papers ever could. I didn't even argue. I just hung up. That evening, I sat in my car with 2 suitcases and a small box of clothes, parked behind a grocery store. I had no money, no home, and no one to call. The parking lot was almost empty, and the streetlights flickered above me. I wrapped myself in my jacket, trying not to cry, but I couldn't stop. I remember looking at that store, wondering how my life had collapsed so completely. That was my first night sleeping in my car, the lowest point of my life. I didn't know then that someday, I'd walk into that same store dressed in designer clothes, buying food for the chef who worked in my mansion's kitchen. But that night, I was just a broken woman, alone and trying to survive. The night I left my car and checked into a cheap roadside motel, I told myself it was only temporary. The room smelled like old smoke and bleach, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear people arguing next door. I didn't have much money left, so I paid for only 3 nights. Every morning, I'd sit on the edge of that narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I started looking for any job I could find. With no savings and no one to help, I didn't have the luxury of waiting for something decent. After a few rejections, I landed a cleaning job through an agency. It was night work, empty offices, long hallways, quiet buildings. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough for me to eat and keep that small motel room. I worked alone most nights. The silence gave me time to think, maybe too much time. I'd scroll through my phone during breaks and sometimes see pictures of Ethan. He had moved on fast. He was already with someone new, a woman I used to work with at the marketing firm. Seeing them together made my stomach twist. She was wearing the dress I once wore on our anniversary. They looked happy. I wanted to scream. But instead, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that anger wouldn't fix my life. For the first time, I began thinking about what I wanted, not what others expected from me. I remembered how good I was at my old job, how I'd loved branding, design, and helping small businesses grow. One night, during my lunch break, I used the office computer I was cleaning to search for online courses. I found a few free business and marketing classes and decided to start. During the day, I studied. At night, I cleaned. It was exhausting. My back hurt, my eyes burned, and some nights I cried quietly into my pillow. But every time I finished a module or got a small certificate, I felt a spark of pride. For the first time in years, I was doing something just for me. A few months later, I started offering small digital branding services online. Logo designs, social media layouts, basic marketing materials. At first, I charged almost nothing just to get clients. The first person who paid me $50 made me feel like I'd won the lottery. Slowly, the work began to grow. Word spread and people liked what I did. My motel room became my first office. I'd work until sunrise, sending drafts and learning new software. The exhaustion was constant, but so was the quiet satisfaction of building something with my own hands. It wasn't much yet, but for the first time since losing everything, I felt steady. I wasn't rich. I wasn't even close. But I was moving forward, and this time, I was the one steering my own life. 2 years passed before I realized how far I had come. The small freelance work that started in a motel room had turned into something real. I had moved out of that place into a small studio apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. My laptop sat on a secondhand desk, surrounded by sticky notes, sketches, and a cheap coffee maker that kept me going through long nights. By then, I had built a small list of regular clients, small shops, local restaurants, and online sellers who needed logos, menus, and branding help. I worked hard, treated every client with respect, and never missed a deadline. Word spread, and new requests kept coming in. For the first time in my life, I was earning more than I ever did at my old job. One afternoon, while checking emails, I noticed a message from someone named Mason Avery. He owned a growing restaurant chain across several states and said he'd seen my work for another small cafe. He wanted me to design a full rebrand for his company. At first, I thought it was a joke. I even checked if the email was real. It was. I spent days preparing the proposal. Every detail, every mock-up, every concept had to be perfect. When I finally sent it, I was shaking. A week later, Mason called. He said he loved my ideas and wanted to offer me a long-term contract. The amount he offered was more money than I had made in my entire first year combined. I remember sitting there in silence after the call, just staring at my computer screen. For the first time, I cried, not from pain, but from relief. That deal changed everything. I didn't waste a single dollar. I invested it all back into the business. I bought better equipment, upgraded my software, and hired 2 part-time assistants to help with design work. Within a year, I had more clients than I could handle. By the 4th year, I officially registered my company, Dunn Creative Strategies LLC. My name was on the paperwork, and I felt like I had finally stepped into the life everyone said I could never have. I rented a small office downtown and hired 3 full-time employees. The woman who once scrubbed office floors at night was now leading meetings in a glass-walled conference room. It felt surreal walking into my own office each morning, seeing my name on the door. My clients grew from small local businesses to larger brands, and Mason introduced me to other company owners. My income soared, but what meant the most was that I built it all myself. No favors, no shortcuts, no handouts. Sometimes I'd think about Ethan or my brother Matthew and how they said I'd never make it. I didn't feel angry anymore. Their words had once crushed me, but now they just reminded me how strong I'd become. I wasn't the woman begging for help anymore. I was the woman who built her own empire from nothing. Buying my dream house was something I used to think only happened to other people. But after years of working nonstop, saving every penny, and growing my company, it finally became possible. I spent weeks looking for the right place, something peaceful but strong, something that would remind me of how far I'd come. Then I found it, a stunning white mansion just outside Charleston, surrounded by tall oak trees and a wide driveway that looked like something out of a magazine. The moment I saw it, I knew it was mine. When the real estate agent handed me the keys, I couldn't speak. I just stood there in the empty living room, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, trying to believe it was real. I had gone from sleeping in my car to standing in a home worth $3.2 million. I touched the walls, the marble countertops, the polished floors, and whispered to myself, "You did this, Caroline." I didn't buy it to show off. I bought it because I promised myself, back when everything fell apart, that one day I would have a space that was completely mine, safe, beautiful, and peaceful. No one could kick me out this time. No one could tell me I didn't belong. The news of my success spread fast. My name had started appearing in business articles and local magazines, and people from my past began to notice. It started with a text from Matthew, my brother. He wrote, "Hey, just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a while. How's life treating you?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying with a simple, "I'm doing well, thanks." I knew why he was reaching out. He didn't miss me. He missed what he thought he could get from me. A week later, I received a message from Ethan, my ex-husband. It was short and fake sweet. "I saw your interview. I'm proud of you, Caroline. Always knew you'd make it big." The same man who once called me worthless was now pretending to be supportive. I didn't bother replying. There was nothing left to say. Then came the letter from his parents, handwritten, full of insincere warmth. "Dear Caroline," it began, "we've missed you dearly. Family is family, and we'd love to see you again. Let's reconnect soon." They even underlined family is family, as if those words could erase the night they threw me out with nothing but my suitcase. I laughed softly as I folded the letter and set it aside. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't naive either. I knew exactly what was coming. The same people who had turned their backs on me when I had nothing were now circling back, because I finally had everything they wanted: a successful business, financial stability, and a mansion they could only dream about. That night, I stood on the balcony of my new home, watching the city lights in the distance. The air was quiet, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. I didn't need their approval. I had built my life without them, and that was all the victory I needed. It started one quiet morning when I heard a familiar voice calling my name through the gate intercom. I walked to the screen and froze. It was Matthew, my brother. I hadn't seen him in years, not since the day he told me to lie in the bed I made. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Hey sis, long time no see." I was in the area and thought I'd drop by. I could have ignored him, but something inside me said to listen. He looked thinner, tired, and worn down. He told me he had lost his job and was between places. He asked if he could stay in my guest house for a short while until he got back on his feet. Part of me wanted to say no, but another part, the part that still remembered family, agreed. I told him it was temporary. At first, he acted grateful. He thanked me repeatedly, cooked breakfast, and said he'd start looking for work soon. But within a week, things began to change. He stopped pretending to look for jobs and started lounging around the property like he owned it. He'd invite friends over without asking, use my main kitchen, and even tell my staff what to do. When I reminded him it was temporary, he laughed it off and said, "Relax, Caroline. You've got plenty of space. Don't act like you're struggling." That comment stung, not because it was rude, but because it sounded just like the old Matthew, the one who always looked down on me when I had nothing. Then, as if on cue, the next storm came. One afternoon, I received a message from Ethan. I hadn't heard from him since his fake congratulatory text. This time, he said he needed to talk in person. I ignored him at first, but he showed up anyway, at my gate, holding hands with a woman I vaguely recognized. When the guard let me know who it was, I almost laughed. It was his ex-wife, the same woman he'd left me for. Ethan looked nothing like the confident man I once knew. He had lost weight, his suit looked cheap, and his voice carried the desperation of someone who had hit rock bottom. He said their marriage had ended, his business had gone under again, and he needed help, financial help. He said he just needed a loan to get back on track. His ex-wife stood beside him, pretending to look ashamed. I told them both I wasn't a bank, wished them luck, and turned back inside. 2 days later, I received an unexpected visit from his parents. They drove up unannounced, smiling too wide, holding a box of cookies as if that could erase everything. "Caroline, sweetheart," his mother said, "we've missed you like a daughter. You were always the best thing that happened to Ethan." I didn't even let them finish. I simply said, "You made your choice years ago. Please respect mine now." When the gate closed behind them, I stood there in silence. My past was trying to creep back into my life, one familiar face at a time. But I wasn't the same woman they once stepped on. I was stronger now, and this time, I wasn't letting anyone take advantage of me again. After those visits, I knew exactly what was happening. They didn't miss me. They missed what I could give them. Money, comfort, status. The same people who once watched me struggle were now circling back because they thought I'd forgotten. But I hadn't. I remembered every word, every moment they turned their backs. I could have shut them out completely, but instead, I decided to play along, on my own terms. I wanted to see how far they would go, how much they would pretend, and how easily they would show their true colors again. This time, I wouldn't be the fool. I started with Matthew. He had been hinting about some business idea, claiming he could make good money if only he had a small investment. So one morning, over coffee, I told him I might be interested in helping, if he could show me a proper plan. I said I wanted everything written down with numbers and goals. His eyes lit up immediately. He started talking fast, promising that I wouldn't regret it. I smiled and said, "Put it in writing first." What he didn't know was that I recorded every conversation. I wanted to document everything, from the first fake compliment to the last desperate lie. A few days later, Ethan called again. He sounded defeated but polite. He said he had an idea for a marketing partnership. My company could consult for his new business, and in return, we'd both benefit. It was the same man who once called my work useless. I told him I'd think about it, asked him to send me details, and pretended to sound interested. Every call, every message, I kept as evidence. I wanted to see how long it would take before he slipped back into manipulation. Then came the in-laws. They reached out again, this time through a mutual acquaintance, saying their home was close to foreclosure. They hinted that maybe I could help them settle the mortgage since families should look out for one another. I didn't say yes or no. I told them I'd think about it and asked for the paperwork. Of course, they sent it within hours. Each of them thought they were winning me over. They came to dinners, smiled for pictures, and told me stories about how they'd always believed in me. I let them talk. I nodded, smiled, and played along. But behind every polite response, I was collecting proof. Their fake kindness, their manipulation, their greed. At night, I'd sit in my office, reviewing the messages and voice notes. I was calm, patient, and focused. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about closure. I wanted them to see what I had become, and to realize that the woman they once used and abandoned now saw right through them. They thought I was giving them a second chance. In reality, I was building the stage where they'd expose themselves, one lie at a time. When everything was ready, I decided it was time to end the act. I sent out invitations for a family dinner. I told them I wanted to put the past behind us and start fresh. They all agreed right away, too eagerly. Matthew said he couldn't wait to be a real brother again. Ethan texted that he was looking forward to catching up. Even his parents sent a message saying how happy they were that I was finally moving on. That evening, the mansion was lit beautifully. The dining table was set with candles, flowers, and silverware. I wore a simple black dress and a calm smile. My staff had the night off. I wanted this moment to be private. When they arrived, they acted like we were one big happy family. Matthew handed me a bottle of wine. Ethan hugged me like nothing had ever happened, and his parents complimented the house nonstop. We sat down to dinner, and for a while, everything seemed polite. They talked, laughed, and praised my success, pretending to be proud of me. I played along, asking them questions, letting them think they were winning me over. Then, when dessert was about to be served, I stood up and said, "Before we finish, I have something special to share with you all." The lights dimmed slightly, and a screen on the far wall flickered to life. I picked up the remote and pressed play. The first slide appeared, an old text message from Matthew. It was the one where he told me, "You made your bed. Now lie in it." He froze, his face draining of color. The next slide showed screenshots of Ethan's private messages with the woman he cheated on me with. The same woman he had married after our divorce. The room fell silent. Then came the emails, messages between his parents, laughing about how Ethan finally got rid of that dead weight. His mother's hand trembled as she reached for her glass of water. Slide after slide, I exposed everything they had said and done. Their mockery, their betrayal, their lies. Each image, each recording, was another knife they had once thrown my way, now coming back to them. Ethan tried to interrupt, stammering that it was all in the past, but I didn't stop. I wanted them to face the truth. Finally, I reached the last slide. It was a simple image, a photo of the mansion's deed, my name printed clearly across the top. Under it, in bold letters, I had written, "You said I'd never make it." No one spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the projector. I looked at each of them, one by one. "This," I said softly, "is what happens when you bet against me." I turned off the screen and walked out of the dining room, leaving them sitting there in silence. For years, they had made me feel small. That night, without raising my voice or showing anger, I took all of my power back. After that dinner, everything changed. The mask came off for everyone, and there was no going back. Matthew was the first to leave. He didn't say a word, just grabbed his jacket and walked out with his head down. A few days later, I saw his message pop up on my phone. "I'm sorry for everything." I didn't realize how bad it was. I didn't reply. Some apologies only come when people are exposed, not when they're truly sorry. Ethan, on the other hand, tried harder. He came to my office unannounced one morning, looking desperate. His voice was soft, almost pleading. He said he wanted to make things right, that he had changed. I just listened quietly. When he finished, I looked him in the eye and said, "You don't get to fix what you destroyed only because I survived it." He didn't know that while he was trying to win sympathy, I had already taken care of the legal side of things. The unpaid alimony he owed, the one he kept delaying with excuses, was now officially in the hands of collections. He would have to pay every last cent, with interest. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just handled it the right way, the way he never expected I could. His parents disappeared soon after. They didn't call, didn't send another letter. They had learned that I'd reported their hidden tax issues, something I found while going through old files related to Ethan's family business. I hadn't done it out of revenge. I just wanted to close every door that connected me to them. When people destroy your peace, the only way to win is to make sure they can never touch your life again. In the weeks that followed, my house felt lighter. The air inside was calm, no more tension, no more pretending. I spent my mornings on the balcony, drinking coffee while the sun rose over the trees. Sometimes I would drive past that old grocery store where I used to park my car and sleep. I remembered the cold nights, the tears, the fear of not knowing what tomorrow would bring. But I didn't cry anymore. I smiled, because that parking lot was where I found myself, where everything I lost made room for everything I was meant to build. I didn't tell anyone what I did to set things right. I didn't need validation or praise. Silence was stronger. Walking away from those who once broke me was the loudest statement I could make. When I closed the door to my mansion that final night, I didn't look back. The same people who once left me alone in my car were now out of my life for good. And as the house lights dimmed and the quiet settled in, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace, real and unshakable. The days turned quieter after everyone was gone. Caroline finally had space to breathe. Her mornings began with soft sunlight spilling through the glass walls of her living room, and her nights ended with the sound of the pool's gentle ripples outside. There was no more chaos, no more walking on eggshells, no more pretending to be okay. For the first time in years, her home felt like peace. One evening, she sat by the pool with a cup of tea, watching the sky turn orange and gold. The mansion glowed under the setting sun, and she realized something important. This house wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It wasn't about showing off success or getting revenge. It was about freedom. Every brick, every room, every view was a reminder that she had survived everything meant to destroy her. She thought back to the woman who once cried in her car, holding on to nothing but a few clothes and shattered pride. That version of herself had no idea what was coming, the pain, the struggle, the loneliness. But she also didn't know the strength that lived inside her. Caroline had built her life back piece by piece, without shortcuts, without favors, without anyone's approval. The mansion wasn't the dream, she was. The woman she became through all the heartbreak, through all the nights spent working and studying, through every betrayal that turned into motivation. That was the real victory. Sometimes, she'd still get messages from people who once ignored her. Old co-workers congratulated her, distant relatives wanted to reconnect. And even strangers who once pitied her now admired her. But Caroline didn't respond. She had learned that peace isn't found in applause. It's found in silence, in knowing who you are when no one's watching. As the sky darkened, she wrapped herself in a blanket and leaned back, letting the cool air brush against her face. The pool lights shimmered softly, and her reflection stared back at her, calm, confident, unbothered. She smiled not out of pride, but out of gratitude. Everything she had gone through, the loss, the betrayal, the heartbreak, had built the woman sitting there now. And for the first time, she didn't feel anger toward the people who abandoned her. They were part of her story, but not part of her ending. She whispered quietly to herself, almost like a promise. I was never meant to stay small. The words felt like closure. They weren't about defiance, they were about truth. She wasn't the woman they threw away. She wasn't the broken wife or the desperate sister anymore. She was the author of her own story. As the stars began to appear above her, Caroline took one last look at the glowing mansion. Her home, her peace, her proof. Then she stood, smiled softly, and walked inside. The past was over. The future was hers.